Hey, y'all. So, chapter 28, we're getting so close to the end. Maddie's made a decision. She is not going to sell the coffee house. She's going to run it. And she knew that that would be too hard for her to do by herself, so she took on a partner. And she's offered that partnership to Eliza. I want you to understand that's a very, very generous gift. Eliza is now part owner of this coffee house. She's no longer an employee. She no longer works for Maddie. Her and Maddie own this coffee house together. So that was a very generous gift that Maddie gave to Eliza. But also, it's kind of what you'd call a win-win, right? Maddie gets the help that she needs because she needs Eliza. Maddie's not a cook. Eliza is a very good cook. She knows how to cook and run the kitchen for the coffee house. She's used to doing that already. And so Maddie needs that. And Eliza, of course, now has a steady job, and Eliza will make a lot more money now. She's not just getting a paycheck, earning money for working there. She actually gets half of the profits that the coffee house makes. So both ladies are benefiting largely from this. So we're on chapter 28. Here we go. November 10th. Chapter 27, when they were having their Thanksgiving, was October 30th. So this is a good almost 2 weeks later, about 11, 12 days later. So some time has passed, and they were going to open the coffee house the next day. So we've been running the coffee house now for almost 2 weeks, so we'll see how it goes. November 10th, 1793. 3 days after we opened for business, every chair in the front room was filled. The air was thick again with arguments, tobacco smoke, and the smell of fresh coffee and cakes. Eliza was in the kitchen cooking up a storm, and the room had never been cleaner. Mother would have been very proud. I carried a tray above my head. Who wants to try some apple cake? A free sample, I offered. Over here, Maddie, over here, the shouts came from all directions. I smiled. Free samples were proving a clever way to get the customers to eat more. Feed them one bite, and they'd pay for 3 more. I quickly distributed the small pieces of apple cake and went through refilling coffee mugs. Another cup? I asked. I picked up a mug in front of a doctor who was studying a chessboard. He nodded, deep in concentration. He kept his finger on his queen, in danger of being captured by his opponent's pawn. Could I get some soup, too? He asked. This match is far from over. Me too, said his companion. How about some mutton stew? I asked. Perfect. Ha! The doctor rescued his queen by moving his knight. Ah, scoundrel, muttered the other man. Right away, sir, I said, picking up the tray. Eliza and Nathaniel were in the kitchen. He had stepped in to help us with errands since we opened. He was also Eliza's taste tester. We need more stew, I said, 2 bowls. She shook her head. This keeps up. We'll be serving breakfast, too. I have plenty of ideas, I assured her. What if we baked small cakes and delivered them to the State House with a handbill advertising our new wares? Eliza frowned. How many cakes? The price of sugar is still pretty high. How about apple bread instead? That's cheaper to make. Nathaniel cleared his throat. I could paint a sign for you to put out front. I could make a design for the handbill, too. And I suppose we'll pay you in cakes, right? I joked. That would suit me fine. He rose from his chair. I have to go to Peel's. See you tomorrow. Eliza waited until he was gone. He's useful for a painter. I smiled. Where are the children? Sleeping, thank goodness, Eliza said. When they wake up, I'm going to set them to work churning butter again. That kept you and Polly out of trouble when you were small. I nodded. I want to visit Polly's mother on Sunday. Don't let me forget. Now, I need 2 bowls of mutton stew. When I had served the stew and filled up the next round of empty cups, I surveyed the room. It was brighter with Nathaniel's paintings on the walls. He had already sold 2. Watson, next door, was interested in selling his lot. But I couldn't afford to build an addition to the coffee house just yet. Maybe by spring. The weather would be better then anyway. Everything was going the way I had planned. But I still felt hollow. The outside of my life was sound. Eliza and I had the coffee house. Nathaniel and I had an understanding. Nell would stay. I was still a long way away from being able to travel to Paris, but it would happen someday. And yet, the fever lingered. Grandfather's chair by the hearth stood empty. The parrot's cage was gone. The ghosts of friends lost in those last months flitted across when I least expected them. And then there was the ache I avoided most of all. The front door swung open with a crash. All conversation ceased. It was Nathaniel, struggling to catch his breath. "It's the president," he said. "President Washington. He's returned. He's coming down High Street right now." The men all abandoned their chairs at once and fought to get out the door. I looked back in the kitchen. "I've got a cake rising," Eliza said. "I'm not leaving that for any man." "You go on." "Come on, Maddie," Nathaniel called. "Hurry." High Street was already lined with people, all peering anxiously up the road. Nathaniel grabbed my hand and pulled me along until we found a break in the crowd. "There he is!" someone shouted. "Huzzah! Huzzah! General George is back!" the crowd roared in approval. Men took off their hats and waved them. Women fluttered handkerchiefs, and children jumped up and down. A group of 3 riders proceeded down the middle of the street. "Advisors," Nathaniel said. "They don't count." "Look, there he is!" The president rode a few paces behind, calmly smiling and waving at the crowd. He rode his beautiful white horse, reins in one hand, his hat in the other. He nodded to the crowd with a dignified air. If Grandfather were here, he'd be busting his buttons by now. I never thought Washington was handsome, but on that horse, he looked like something special. He was our leader. The crowd continued cheering and waving until he was far down the block. If the president was back, then the fever was truly over. If the president was back, we were safe. I threw my arms around Nathaniel and planted a big kiss on his cheek. He pulled back in surprise. "Do you always do that when the president rides by?" "If so, I'll take a job working for him." I blushed and looked down at my feet. "I'm just happy," I said. The crowd was thinning. Some people followed down High Street. Others went back to what they'd been doing. My afternoon customers hurried back to the coffee house. That was a comforting sight. Nathaniel pointed back up the road. "Who do you think all those people are?" Following behind the president's entourage came a scraggly parade of wagons and carriages. "Members of the cabinet?" I ventured. A man standing next to us shook his head. "No, them's the folks that waited. They waited until General George came back. Knew it would be safe then, the fever gone." One of the carriages turned off High Street and stopped in front of our coffee house. "Time to get back to work, Miss Cook," Nathaniel said. "Look, you've got another customer." The driver and a woman dressed in country clothes were gently helping a frail woman with gray in her hair step out of the carriage. She leaned heavily on their arms. When her feet were on the ground, she raised her face to us. Tired, familiar, beautiful. Mother had come home.